I mean, you know, to me, I wasn't there, but to me, just the fact that a European, a Spaniard, and a Roman Catholic respects the people there, to me is extraordinary. And Bartolomé de las Casas did that, and they were very much aware of, you know, we had to protect this. So, obviously, there are also many stories of native people who were as brutal as everybody else, even before the Spaniards came. So there's not about that. But.
You mentioned that he did insist on baptism. Is that exceptional?
Yeah, he said that you know, you get one of these things. You know, I don't know if the Spaniards here will agree with me, but sometimes, you know, the Castilians or Spanish people have a funny way. It's not the Anglo-Saxon way. You would say, okay, you will not be baptized unless you really ask for it. But then you have ways to, but you should ask for it because otherwise you go to hell and this and that. So it depends on the person, maybe the priest or the missionary doing the work, not to respect. The other extreme is Bartolomé de las Casas, who said, no, the Spanish soldiers, the Spanish government, should not have even told the Incans not to offer human sacrifice, because that was their conscience, and you have to do that. So you see both. There has to be something in between, that you take the good and learn from it, and also you destroy what is really obviously, you know, a superstition or just, you know, terrible politics or religion or whatever it is.
Here.
Frank Roccanelli. Did you say that Vasco became a Franciscan?
No, there was a bishop. The first bishop was a Franciscan from the Basque country who went to Mexico in 1527 or 1528. And Vasco de Quiroga went as a judge, as a layman. And 5 years later, he was ordained a bishop for Michoacán. So he went from a priest to bishop. Yeah, that was.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because there is some evidence that Moore was attracted to become a Franciscan
Yes.
priest. Stapleton says that, and Moore had friends who were third order. Very likely that William Blount, Lord Mountjoy, probably was the third order, and probably Queen Catherine of Aragon and her mother were third order as well. And of course there were these Franciscan priories in Greenwich, and certainly there was one a few blocks away from Milk Street, right up against the wall as you were going out. So anyway, you mentioned the virtue of humanity or humaneness, and I think that's very, very important in the work. A paper that I wrote that was published recently in Moriah talks about clemencia. Not, strangely enough, not misericordia, but clemencia. So I was thinking that, and then maybe, do you know why Vasco got this honor of being in the Order of St. John? Were there reasons or whatever he did?
Probably, I don't remember that, but probably just being part of the Spanish government or a nobleman, you would go for one of these orders. In the case of Quiroga, obviously the order, they were all Christian orders for lay people, so very much like the Third Order Franciscan, the St. John of Jerusalem. So these knights had special call, as they understood it, to protect, you know, the widows, the refugees, the poor people, the children, orphans, and things like that. So maybe that would have been a preparation for the priesthood. Maybe the other possibility is that once in Mexico, he realized, I mean, the church was very powerful then, there is no doubt about that, so maybe he realized, if I want to get into forming these pueblos hospitales, it would help me much to become a bishop, okay, to be, so that's...
I have another question.
Yes.
I think you have made reference to some of these. But when you read Utopia, you realize that Thomas More is not that happy with some of the aspects of the utopian society. He simply presents them, and then you have to decide whether or not you think that is correct or not. But Vasco de Quiroga, listening to what you have said, one has the impression that maybe he has a very naive or idealized vision of the native inhabitants of Mexico, like the good savage, the good wild man who is almost perfect. When you say that they reminded him of the apostles, don't you think didn't he realize that they also had weaknesses, some aspects that were not so excellent?
Without a doubt, yeah. He must have seen behavior very different from all this, goodness of heart and so forth. No greed, no. Now, my only interpretation is that, at least according to the Christian gospel, in a sense, the Christian faith demands that kind of naivete. Okay? If you want to love every human being, every single one, you're supposed to think well even of the criminal, okay? Even of the terrorist.
That's a good point.
So, now to me the problem with not with Thomas More, but the point is that that here is someone who at least in his mind is able to think of a terrific society, no matter how ideal, that has tolerance for, in some way, for other beliefs and, like women, priests, and whatever it is. And yet, not many years later, in real life, he becomes the sort of the Inquisition against Christians whose conscience takes them into some other, towards maybe Lutheranism or and so forth. To me, that is sort of that is what forces in a modern Christian some kind of critique of Thomas More. So I can understand that but still, I wish that Thomas More had been also like Erasmus, maybe more tolerant. Well, just maybe because of his being chancellor or politics, he had to do something, yeah, and that is why many people today, of course, they, with this what is the name of the writer, the novelist, with this famous Hilary Mantel. Okay. And so it is, she was Catholic and then left the church, and then Thomas More is like a monster. Even you say, well, there were only 3 heretics being executed but still it's 3. I mean, you cannot say, well, it's only 3. I mean, just one, have one is just too much. Because the Christian faith has that absolute naivete. That person who is a real jerk, who is a murderer, is also a child of God. And you have to respect that. That's the way I see it. Okay? I don't know if I guess the theologians also will, today, they will agree with me. They will say, yes, you have to respect every human being. In fact, this Pope Francis, has said a number of things that would have been blasphemous, heresy, only 20 years ago. Who am I to judge? I say, wait a second. That's why you're Pope, you have to judge. He says, no, who am I to judge? Which, by the way, is something that Francis has learned from the gospel. Jesus is saying, do not judge.
Yeah, so, back to Thomas More, he was a public officer. I think he was applying the law.
Well, yeah, but then that is, I know, yeah, but then that is the excuse. Well, I am only applying the law. But you can take that to anything, I mean, the Nazis were also applying the law in many ways, so there is, that is what you can apply. Thomas says, yes, you can apply the law, but always respect the humanity of the criminal. That's
what he says.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the 16th century approach. And I think by 16th century standards, Thomas More was quite humane, say, compared to
Yes,
real
of
Thomas
course.
Cromwell. I don't think he presided, he certainly did preside over any heresy trials, and he did preside over any treason trials. So if he did have any part in heretics being put to death, it was indirect. Unlike the very direct influence of Thomas Cromwell, and Cranmer himself was a judge. And Cranmer had blood on his hands, not just Anastia,
Yes.
but a lot of Catholic blood that Protestants don't consider as real blood, because these are all traitors, and so they deserve to be executed. But yeah, it's like in the United States today, the death penalty is still acceptable. So you might say, the judge was just, I don't agree with the penalty. So under the laws that existed, death penalty was a possibility. In fact, from what we see in Utopia, Moore didn't agree with hanging thieves. But that was the practice, you know. So maybe he was relatively humane that way, but they're judging him by our standards 5 centuries later.
I mean, I see Utopia, like all great books, and it was mentioned right here just a couple of hours ago, a good book invites the reader to think. Okay, that's what a good book is.
What are you going to
Well,
ask?
I'm just fascinated that this sense of an intentional community came about so early with Vasco de Quiroga. And I mean, in the United States, there have been so many intentional communities over the years, and it's a very viable strain in utopian thought. And so, I mean, Vasco de Quiroga could be linked up with that later development of utopian communities. It seems to me there were some in Uruguay as well.
Yeah, Jesuits in the 18th
Yes.
century.
Yeah. So, but there are an enormous number in North America. I mean, there may be a reason for that, several reasons for that.
But the North American development comes much later. It seems to me, I mean,
Oh,
I've been
yeah.
arguing that the New World is not the main influence in Utopia, but no part of the world was more affected by utopianism initially than America. And that whole history needs to be written, at least
Yes,
in English. It may be written in Spanish.
Yes,
not
yes.
And obviously there'd have to be at least one chapter in Vasco de Quiroga. You know, while there are other utopian communities founded in the 17th, 18th century, besides the Jesuit state in Europe, you know, is there a whole tradition of that in Latin America?
Remember that Thomas More was very attracted to the cloister.
Yeah.
And in a sense, a monastery is a utopia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, suddenly, it's absolute respect. You know, you have your face. That's all you see. You know, the humanity of the individual. There's no greed, no competition, no desire for fame. You know, Friar Einstein is just as good as Friar Tomasito. So it's, and that is, to me, Utopia has also that kind of how can we achieve this? You know, without the the cloister or whatever it is. Yes. Anyway.
In a funny kind of way, I think it ties up in with what Erasmus was trying to do in his early Enchiridion, where he's talking about being a monk in the world, which is very different from the Protestant approach. Taking that monastic spirituality out of the cloister and making it a lay spirituality.
That's true. Yeah. Well, for Catholics, at least, Thomas More is, you know, the first, you know, holy lay man in,
Yeah.
you know, patron of politicians and all that. Very good.
I have a question. My name is David Dale Smith. I'm aficionado.
This gentleman met Silvio Zavala himself and was his friend.
Yes,
and went to his home in Mexico.
Silvio, you get. But my question is maybe a bit off the subject, but how does the apostleship of Junipero Serra compare with Vasco de Quiroga? His missions in California, which was later, I think, much later.
Yeah, let's see, Junipero Serra. I have read only one biography, of a recent one, a very good one, because he was canonized, I believe, a couple of years ago. So I checked that one, written by an American, which was quite good. he was also, again,
Franciscan.
he was organizing from Mexico these, they are not called pueblo hospitales, yes, pueblos, okay, which San Francisco and so forth.
Missions.
The mission, okay? Mission, they were missions. That's the misiones. But, and in many ways, well, the missions were two things. For the very smart kings in Spain, it was the way to populate with Spaniards, all that, and natives who would be baptized, and therefore under, you know, the empire or the kingdom, or New Mexico, Nueva España. And one of, maybe the first reason was the fear that the Russians would come down from Alaska and conquer all that. So who knows, maybe without Junípero Serra, the Russians would be around, you know, California, that would be Russia. So the idea was to form these small misiones, and then to protect, in many ways they also protected the native people there. So again, with Junípero Serra, like with anyone, you know, the field is also maybe divided. I don't know, it's 50-50 or 70-30. About he was terrible, he killed. In that biography, and I don't know much about Junípero Serra, the historian, I wish I could remember his name right now, he's from the States, the historian says that that is not the case. And he was more in favor of Junípero Serra. And he says that the real massacre of Indians in the West came with the U.S. Army many years later, just going, hey, from sea to sea, this is our land. So,
earlier than Serra was Juan de Vidilla, who was a martyr, Franciscan missionary priest, and unfortunately he was martyred by the Indians in Kansas in the early 16th century, but a little later than Thomas More. But, you know, we do see humanity in an ideal sense, of course, within, you know, the noble savages, but then we also see that they also can be murderous.
what I find fascinating with Vasco de Quiroga, I wish I knew more about that, was his deep disgust for European Christianity. And of course, he's going to the Americas at the end of that decade, you know, the 1520 to 1530, which was, you know, everything was collapsing. So it's just like, that is the Antichrist. It's incredible. It was apocalypse and so on, the destruction. The only chance for Christianity will be in the New World. That's what he's so amazed at this Englishman. And he says, Thomas More has been inspired by the Holy Spirit, like Mark and Matthew, to do this in the States. So, you know, for a Spaniard, you don't need anything more. It's the same. We are going to do it. And he tried to do his. In fact, today, you know, this politician, I can't think of Alfonso, something, his name, in the state of Mexico, when he was in Senate or congressman, he passed on legislation to help these pueblo hospitales, okay? To help, you know, maybe the people who, artists or farmers and so on. But still, you know, the title of this corporation was Vasco de Quiroga or Tata Vasco Society and things like that, which is quite extraordinary, trying to revive that. That's why he wanted to remember Vasco de Quiroga once a year, the 14th of March. That was quite interesting, yeah. So I will tell him about this conference.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed this.